One of the most compelling themes in episode 6 of season 2 of Rings of Power is the idea that we all have to face trials. Moments where we have to choose between what we desire and what we believe is right. And our choices and those of the characters in this episode will ultimately shape their fate and that of Middle-earth. And that reflects a fundamental biblical theme, namely that faith is going to be tested. Let's talk about it. Hey, I'm Father Roderick, I'm a priest and I'm a geek, and I'm here to share with you the deeper layers of the stories that we love. So throughout the Bible, we see that God's people undergo trials that test their resolve, their integrity, and their devotion. And this episode of Rings of Power echoes that pattern, highlighting how our characters face their darkest temptations and choices, much like all the characters in Holy Scripture. Let's talk about Sauron and the temptation of power. Adar's revelation to Galadriel at the beginning of the episode about how Sauron operates is chilling. And he explains it very clearly. Sauron doesn't just see people as they are, but also as what they want to be. It is almost divine perception, except it is here twisted and used for manipulation. Sauron's promise is simple. I can make all your desires come true. They will all be a reality, and I will grant you my power so you can realize what you want. And it's through this temptation, playing on our ambition and our desire, is how he slowly starts to bend even the strongest wills to his service. For instance, Celebrimbor, the great elven smith, he is one of his victims. His desire to be respected, to have a legacy, makes him super vulnerable. Sauron, disguised as Annatar, doesn't need to lie to Celebrimbor. He merely amplifies what is already there, this yearning for recognition. Like Eve in the Garden of Eden, Celebrimbor isn't tempted by something foreign, but by the idea that he can become like a god, like a creator of power that will outlast him in this way. And Sauron is like the serpent in the story of Genesis, whispering half-truths that lead Celebrimbor to isolate himself from those who might guide him and protect him against that temptation. He forgets his priorities and is lured into the trap that Sauron has set for him through his desire. Myrddania, another key figure, manipulated by Annatar, craves Celebrimbor's approval. And she is devastated that at one point, Celebrimbor doesn't even remember her name. He is so possessed by this desire to create these 9 rings of power that everything else falls away. He forgets about even the people that he has worked with for years. And while Celebrimbor barely remembers her name, Annatar recognizes her potential, calls her by her name, and asks her to please keep the other elves from interrupting Celebrimbor's important work. And in a very dark twist, Annatar even asks Myrddania to pray for Celebrimbor. Let's pray that he is able to finish his important work before he succumbs to it, before it becomes too much. And the irony here is profound. Prayer, a sacred act, is here twisted by Sauron to serve him. It's a stark reminder of how evil corrupts even the holiest of practices, turning them into instruments of control and manipulation. Let's talk about Galadriel and the temptation of Galadriel. Galadriel's journey also mirrors biblical temptations. Like Christ in the wilderness, in the desert, she's offered power. An army was offered to her by Sauron, disguised, of course, and she wasn't aware that it was Sauron. But instead of relying on the will of the Valar, of what fate might have in store for her, she struggles with this desire to end Sauron by any means necessary. And she is starting to yield control to Adar. He, in a way, maybe even subconsciously, is manipulating her as well. And maybe he is being manipulated into manipulating her. It all fits into this domino game of control and corruption. Adar is, in a way, both an evil figure, but also a deeply tragic figure. Someone who is deeply alone. And the way in which Sauron was able to manipulate him was by promising him that which he most deeply desired, to have an offspring, to have children. But instead of giving him children like Adar himself, he gave him orcs, disfigured children, only children in a sort of metaphorical way, you could say. And these children are not good children. They are bent to evil. They are corrupted. And this promise lured Adar into obeying Sauron's will, only to realize at the very last moment that he was being played. And that is when he tried to kill Sauron with the crown, with the instrument that symbolized the power of Sauron, the crown of Morgoth. This is what is revealed in this episode. I don't know if we heard that before, but it's also connecting this crown to the early origins of Middle-earth and the mythology that Tolkien created. And so both Galadriel and Adar fail to see that their reliance on external power, using an army, using this powerful magical crown, whether through Sauron's promises or the rings, none of those external instruments of power will bring about the true peace and equilibrium that they are seeking. And this mirrors the gospel message that true power does not lie in earthly might, but in giving up your might, setting aside your desires, and to serve a higher, selfless purpose. And the way in which this was woven into the story of this episode was so impressive. And it made it so obvious that both Galadriel and Adar were going to fall for the trap because it was so alluring. If only we had an army, if only we would work together, your army of orcs, and then my rings, and then this crown of Morgoth. It's all relying on external things, whereas the true message, I think, of the story that Tolkien tries to tell us is that true power, true leadership, and ultimately also the salvation of Middle-earth can only be found in sacrifice, in self-sacrifice, in the courage to give away your life in order to find it for yourself and for the rest of the world. Let's talk about Elendil's trial, another incredibly impressive sequence in this episode. This is all about Elendil, who we have gotten to know as a very upright person, very loyal, extremely honest. But here, his faith is also going to be tested. And he's going to be set in front of a choice between two things that he loves and two things that he desires. And what is he going to choose? So the trial of Elendil before Pharazôn evokes one of the most powerful biblical moments, Jesus standing before Pontius Pilate. And even the way in which they show this moment of trial, everything screams that, oh, of course, Elendil here is supposed to evoke the character of Christ. He even wears kind of similar clothes as we have in our iconography, in the way that we depict this moment that Jesus is condemned and Jesus is put on trial. Pharazôn offers Elendil an easy way out, but it's a compromise with worldly power. But Elendil, like Christ, in front of Pontius Pilate, refuses to bow. Faith is not faith if it is not lived, he tells his daughter, who is trying to convince him to give up what she identifies as pride. But he says, no, this is part of my identity. If I give up the things in which I believe, I'm no longer me. What good is it to be alive while having betrayed your vocation? I'd rather be dead, but still be one person. And he echoes in that stance the New Testament's teaching that faith without works is dead. You have to not only confess your faith, but you have to show it, even if it means the ultimate sacrifice, the readiness to give away your life, to stand for what you believe in. Elendil would rather die with his integrity intact than to live with a divided heart. What an incredible lesson. What a beautiful, beautiful message of this episode. His daughter mistakes his faith, as I said, for pride, but Elendil's resolve remains unshaken. And then Miriel, like Simon of Cyrene during the Way of the Cross, steps forward at the very last moment to bear his burden. She offers to pay the ultimate price. She offers herself as the sacrifice. And this act of selflessness, strengthened by Elendil's example, because he was the one who told her, you have to stand for your faith, for what you believe in, transforms her own faith. Now, the setting for the trial of Elendil, which ends up being the trial of Miriel, is rich of biblical connotations in the way it's depicted. Because here they are summoning a sea serpent or a sea worm, a horrible monster. And the monster is going to decide whether or not the person who is thrown into the sea is innocent or not. And this, of course, reminds a lot of us of a very famous story in the Bible where Jonah is thrown into the sea and another sea monster in the form of a huge whale or whatever it is going to gobble up Jonah. And this too was the result of a trial. The reason that they threw him overboard was basically that the crew of the ship was accusing Jonah of being one who had been fighting God, and so God was punishing them by putting them in peril and maybe even by obliterating them. And so they figured, well, if we just throw him into the sea, then we'll leave it up to God. It's not our business anymore. We will just get rid of him, and that's going to be the end of our trouble. And so the fact that here Miriel is now in the water waiting for this judgment of the Valar, executed by this sea worm, evokes this moment between death and maybe life, maybe survival. And we see underwater how the monster approaches and looks at her, and then you have to remember how symbolic these eyes are. So Miriel is blind. She cannot see the monster, but the monster is looking at her and sees right through her and sees that she has a pure soul, that she is innocent. And so he spares her. And when we see the people waiting for what happens under the water, they don't know. They all think that this is the end of Miriel, that she's been swallowed up by the monster, only to discover that she's spit out. She's literally thrown back on the shore by the monster and dripping wet, almost as if she has gone through a baptism. She is the one who lives, and the people around her are starting to understand that this may be a sign of the Valar, that she is supposed to be the true ruler and not Pharazôn. We don't know how that ends, but it is a wonderful way in which the story shows that her leadership and her fate are defined by the choice that she makes to sacrifice herself to save Elendil. And it's this self-sacrificial moment that is redemptive, that saves not only the life of Elendil, but maybe is also able to bring about salvation for all the other people and for the future of the land. All that is full of biblical resonance. Let's talk about the stranger's choice, the test of the heart. The stranger's arc in this episode presents a simpler, yet no less profound biblical parallel. He faces a choice: to pursue his own destiny or to save the two hobbits that are in mortal danger. It's the classic Luke Skywalker on Dagobah moment. Do you chase your calling, finish your training with Yoda, or do you fly off, do you interrupt your training to save and rescue the ones that you love and who you've seen in a vision and you know that they are in mortal danger, they might die unless you do something. And Tom's advice to the stranger here is deeply spiritual. And he says, you will only find your true staff, and the words are important here, you will only find your true staff when your heart is single in service to the secret fire. A very mysterious way, I think, of expressing that it's ultimately not the staff, the physical staff, that will give the stranger control over his magical powers, but it is the will to do good, the will to save people. And instead of falling for the trap of trying to be the savior of Middle-earth, to save the ones that Iluvatar has put on your path, even if it's just two humble hobbits. It's letting go of even the idea of what you think you should be to do what you have to do and what is right in this very moment. And what is that secret fire? As a Catholic theologian, of course, it immediately makes me think of the fire of the Holy Spirit. The fire that makes us burn out of love and is making us feel warm whenever we are in the presence of people that need that warmth, that need that light. And so all this echoes Christ's teaching in the Gospels. Where your treasure is, there also your heart will be. The stranger must learn that true strength does not come from wielding a physical staff or to even have control, but to have a heart that is aligned with the greater good. And that heart is his true staff. It's his true guide. It's the true thing that will channel the powers that he's been given towards what is good for the people that he meets. Let's talk about the dwarves and the temptation of greed. The dwarves, especially Durin III and Durin IV, his son, faced their own trials. Durin has been consumed by his desire for wealth. And you start to see that under the influence of Sauron, he wants even more than gold and diamonds. He wants power. And that is an insatiable desire. And it will only lead to doom and destruction. And we see this in Middle-earth. We see also the same thing happening in our world throughout history. Annatar knows exactly how to manipulate that greed, to use these desires of the dwarves to corrupt them, just as he did with Celebrimbor's ambition. The lure of Mithril is not just about riches, it is about power, and Durin knows that if he controls the supply of Mithril, he can control anyone. And that's what he wants. At least that's what he thinks he wants, because of the ring. And there's this incredible scene where his son, Durin III, is trying, or Durin IV, I should say, is trying to protect his father. Is trying to take the ring from him. And his father sees it as an attack and pushes him away with supernatural strength. And this is when Durin IV starts to understand that his father is on a threshold and may soon be completely lost unless he does something. And he talks with his wife, and the two are then deciding that they will have to put their own lives in jeopardy for the sake of Durin the third and for the sake of all the dwarves. And for Durin the fourth, this is also an extremely difficult trial because he has to choose between putting the life of his father in peril by disrespecting him, by trying to stop him. And maybe there's only one way to stop him, and that is by killing him. To choose between that horrible, horrible option and the love of his father, the respect that he has for his father. And again, here is a second Star Wars resonance when he says to his wife, I believe there's still good in him. I can still see the father in that dwarf that you say is no longer my father because he is under the spell of the ring, but I can still see my father in there. Is it possible that we are able to redeem him instead of killing him? And you can sense that here too, there is this desire, just like between Miriel and Elendil, this desire to pay the price instead of sacrificing his father. I think Durin the fourth is ready to lay off his own life if that could save his father and if that could save the dwarves. Incredibly powerful stuff here. In conclusion, what did we learn in this episode about how to defeat Sauron? Throughout this episode, the temptation of power echoes the biblical story of Christ's temptation in the wilderness, Satan offering Jesus the kingdoms of the world in exchange for worship, but Christ refuses, choosing instead to follow God's will. And here in the Rings of Power, we see a similar theme emerge. The only way to defeat Sauron is not through might or manipulation. You don't need external tools or instruments like a staff or a sword or an axe. But the way to defeat Sauron is through selflessness. Galadriel, Elendil, the stranger, and even the dwarves all face these same trials that force them to choose between their desires and letting go of those desires and sacrifice them, and maybe even sacrifice their own lives for what is right. And here, like in the Bible, the message is clear. True power lies in sacrifice, in laying down one's desires for the sake of others. That is the one thing that Sauron will never, ever do. And that is the superpower of everyone in Middle-earth. They are much more powerful than they realize. But as long as they try to defeat Sauron with his own weapons, they will all fall for his traps. Only when sacrificing yourself, like Miriel does, only then the truth will shine and the world will find peace. That's what I wanted to share with you. Love this episode, and I would really love to hear your thoughts. So please share them in the comments, and of course, follow for more. And if you want to know what else I do, online or as a coach, as media coach, check out my website at fatherroderick.com. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, I'll even send you a free copy of my newest book, which is called Tales of Power. It is a Tolkien-inspired book about storytelling and how you can use stories to share your values and your ideals and maybe even your faith with the world. Take care and talk to you soon. God bless.